Mr. Curry, how often does the Board of Building Appeals meet?
Has not met in 4 years.
Seems like we can wait for more applications. I think we should table it. Yep.
Agriculture and forestry, right?
Not received any interest for agricultural forestry district.
Water resources protection and monitoring, Vincent Day was not available for this month. I am hopeful, and I believe they will be attending next month to discuss some water issues, concerns that we have. Town boundary line change request. Mr. Whitson, you should take
Sure. I'd like to try to work with my colleagues to move this along. We've been talking about it for a long time. Just if you bear with me just for a minute, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think I've got a reasonable logic that should move us forward. First of all, I think everyone in Rappahannock County values property rights above all other things. This is a private property owner who has asked the town of Washington to approach us about possibly adjusting the town boundary to encompass more or less 4 acres on the corner of 211 and Warren Avenue, which he owns as a private citizen. And with that request now in our hands, I think it is our job and responsibility to act on that request one way or the other, and whether we agree to the boundary line adjustment or not remains to be seen. But I just thought I would provide some of my own input to help move the discussion forward, and then I'm going to put forward a motion, and we'll see where we end up. In addition to the property owner's private property rights, I should note that the portion of the parcel, again, we're talking about 4 acres that currently is outside the town in Rappahannock County, is zoned commercial general. And if you look at section 170-36 of the Rappahannock County zoning ordinance, you will note that while the property owner owning a parcel or a portion of a parcel that is zoned commercial general has many and virtually unlimited by right uses of that property, given its current zoning from a county zoning perspective. The one area among some that is not a by right use is residential dwelling units. Residential dwelling units on a commercial general property require a special use permit under our county zoning ordinance, which would involve both the county planning commission and under our current system, the Board of Zoning Appeals. Recognizing that an agreement to adjust the boundary line would essentially cede control of that portion of the property that's currently subject to the county zoning ordinance, at least from my perspective, the only way that I will support a boundary line adjustment agreement in some form is if such an agreement, and I would ask Mr. Goff or Mr. Curry to take note, if such an agreement would, in some way, however it's worded, not allow for the construction of residential dwelling units on that parcel on the corner that's in question and is subject to the current pending agreement or the agreement that's been put forward for our consideration. That's the first thing. So I would only support the agreement if there were no residential dwelling units placed on that parcel. Second, there's been a lot of discussion in the public about our request for concessions from the town. I just want to be clear on this point. This was not something that originated with me or anyone on the board. Early on last year, the property owner and his attorney spoke to our board, I believe it was in January of 2021, and suggested to us that certain concessions or agreements could be reached as part of this type of agreement. And so that started at least me thinking about what could be exchanged in the mutual interest of both parties, the town and the county. Subsequent to that discussion before our board, there was a draft agreement sent to us, and in there were a collection of what I would characterized as minor concessions that the lawyer for the property owner characterized as a removal of covenants on certain properties in the town. So I would ask that any draft agreement that we consider as a board include all of those offered concessions. And in addition, I would ask that the town find some workaround vis-a-vis their bondholder on their wastewater treatment system to extend to Company One, Volunteer Fire and Rescue in Washington, at least the option for connecting to the wastewater treatment system. And I think that that's an important public safety hook that we can't lose track of here. A couple of other things that I would ask be included in any draft agreement for our board's consideration. I would ask for sufficient screening along 211. This is a relatively intense development that, regardless of what is ultimately placed there, should be screened in some form, and those details certainly will be worked out if we decide to enter into an agreement. I would also ask that accommodations be made to protect our dark skies on that intersection. The county park is across 211. It's a International Dark Skies Park, and so any development on that corner potentially threatens that designation. Finally, I would ask that as part of any agreement for consideration that the property owner be requested to present at least some specificity with regard to what ultimately will be constructed on the parcel, and that the property owner be bound by that agreement. And I think we've already heard that the property owner, and thank you to Mr. Goff for his guidance in this regard, had agreed to be a party to any agreement between the town and the county, so hopefully that's not an area of controversy. So I just wanted to put those items out there again. I would be inclined to support the request for a boundary line adjustment, but only if included in such an agreement, the items I've just described. And with that, I will put forward a motion that our chair schedule a date and time certain in the work session to include the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors with an invitation to the property owner to answer any questions about what I hope will be a more robust draft agreement that would include everything I've just described. And if we all have our calendars, we could set that time now, or we could set it separate from this meeting.
You do also have several budget work sessions over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, that's a good idea.
One of those is already approved.
What are the dates of those budget work sessions?
Could I interject a question? You said a joint work session with the property owner, but.
No, I didn't say joint work session, I said work session with the board.
Well, all right, I didn't mean to say, but we really need a joint work session, I think, with the town, because the agreement is with the town and the county, and not just the county and the property owner.
Yeah, I see your point. I feel better about at least initially meeting as a board, as board of supervisors, and invite the property owner to answer any questions we have so that we can put forward to the town what we think looks like a satisfactory draft agreement that includes our interests. I think it would be better to do it sequentially in my view so that we can at least stick to our county interests.
Well, I'm just concerned that we leave this in completely in the hands of the town later on. We could have it at the locker, like we have at the post office.
Right, and I think that my goal, and hopefully I've articulated it here to some extent, to a lengthy extent, is that whatever draft agreement we're comfortable putting forward for the town's consideration will protect the interests of county residents who don't reside in the town. And I think that's, in fact, why it would, in my mind, make sense to have a work session of this board with the property owner, and then we move forward from there. I wouldn't be comfortable putting forward an agreement that gave any wiggle room to the town outside of what we were requiring in the agreement. And I think either way, both the town and the board of supervisors will have to have public hearings if we ever reach a point where we sign a final agreement.
The town has their public hearings in a place that's not accessible to the public. Most of the public.
Mr. Woodson, I think Mr. Goff was on.
I was trying to make sure I understood. You said no residential dwellings on the parcel that is now zoned county commercial general,
On the parcel as a whole,
even what is now part of the project that's inside the
Right.
town.
right, on the parcel, whatever it is, whatever the tax map number is.
So
So phase two section.
Yeah, my point is that we would be ceding control of 4 acres of whatever the total acres of the parcel is, and once the entire parcel's in the town, I would not support any more residential dwelling units on that parcel. Referring to the tax map number. Okay, so that assumes the whole parcel then is within the town. Other questions?
I think I understand it.
And just to be clear, the Rush River Commons portion of the ongoing project, which is entirely within the town of Washington, already has within it, and this has been approved, 18 residential dwelling units, I believe is the number. And in our last census data, I should add, Rappahannock County lost approximately 18 residential dwelling units. And so that's another reason why, at least from my position, I don't think increased residential density on that corner makes sense.
All right, so we have a motion, we've got, the date of the board where we're meeting for the budget.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'd like to state for the record that my brothers and I own a business that's on Eldon Farm. We crafted a lease with the previous owners, May Industries, and when Mr. Autry bought that, he inherited our lease. That in no way means that I can't talk about it. It does not preclude me from voting or making decisions regarding the Rush River Commons project or the value of it. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Are there any other conflicts on these dates with other board member meetings? I don't think I do. Mr. Carney, I think you had one day, the 14th maybe, where you had a,
So the 21st is the river basin,
21st.
sorry.
I just feel like, I have to say, I was looking at our comprehensive plan earlier today, and one of our principles is that matters of planning and zoning and those sorts of items that are vital to the public interest should be scheduled so as to invite the most possible amount of public interaction and feedback possible. It troubles me that this has only ever occurred, a discussion on this item at the 2 p.m. meetings. We've never had this on a 7 p.m. meeting. I think in order to get the most amount of feedback on this item, we need to start scheduling this for evening meetings. For folks that work, folks that have kids in school, this timing simply doesn't work. And I would really encourage all of us to pump the brakes and do the public meeting first, so that we know how people really feel about this before we set down the road for a solution, and then craft a solution that doesn't fit.
So logistically, what do you want to do?
Well, my other point would be that last time we met, we talked about what our priorities are, and not a single one of us mentioned this.
I'm not making it a priority. It's been on our agenda, I don't know how many months in a row, and I think it's frankly disrespectful to not address it, and I'm not going to keep kicking the can down the road, and wherever we end up on the agreement, we end up on it, but I'd like to just move along and be done talking about it.
I would agree with you if we had gotten answers to our initial questions, but one of our initial questions was, please reference documents that preclude you from providing water to addresses outside of the town. We still have not seen those documents. We asked for maps, and we got some concept drawings. I feel like we haven't gotten straight answers, but we're expected to give an answer. And I think that's a huge problem. And I don't understand how we are expected to make a decision or even set down a path until we have ample public feedback, because there is a lot of public interest in this topic.
So part of my concern was also not having all the information, and that's why I was willing to have a meeting that we would all be able to attend and sit down with the landowner to get the information
Right.
that we had questions for out and clear. And then I do like the idea of adding it to an evening meeting, after that. I don't, having conversations like this or one person just showing up to talk to us, I don't think does it much justice. I'd like to get the plans on the table, have everybody in the room and just ask the questions that we don't know the answers to.
I think that's great, Madam Chairman, but that begs the question, if that was the plan, why don't we have it scheduled for tonight?
We can do it next month.
Yeah, I mean, there was a budget
I think
meeting
it's
for the
good.
evening.
Or schedule a work session at one of our budget meetings, and then we can add it as an agenda item for further public discussion. It doesn't have to necessarily be a public hearing, because I don't think by our next meeting we'll be ready with any kind of final agreement that we might sign. So, Madam Chair, why don't you pick one of our upcoming budget work sessions, we'll see if the property owner is available, and then we can add it to our evening, 7 PM meeting, or session for April 4th, I think, is that first Monday. And I think that would be a reasonable timeline in which to proceed, and at least moving forward. So, I don't know if we could do it as early as this Wednesday, if it's too late to add that. I don't think there's any action coming out of it, so, it would just be a discussion item. Mr. Curry could guide us in that regard. March 14th, March 21st, doesn't matter to me, let's get it on there and see if we can get the annual here.
I think there's always a lot to digest, especially with the budget launch meeting. That is a lot of information. I don't think that's a good meeting to piggyback on. Those daytime meetings are very busy times for folks that work during the day, and I don't think we should undertake it during those meetings.
Or we
I
could-
don't mean to be disagreeable, but I really believe that evening meeting of the regularly scheduled April Board of Supervisors meeting should be the earliest that we take up this business.
I think maybe we could schedule with 3 days' notice, evening work session, 7 PM, pick a date separate and apart from our budget meetings, and then we satisfy Ms. Smith, it seems like. So, maybe, I don't know what nights would make sense. So we've got Wednesday, March 9th, and Monday the 14th, and Monday the 21st for budget work sessions. So maybe an in-between date, sometime in March. And then we'll schedule for 7 PM and see if the property owner could be available on that date at 7 PM for a standalone work session. And, Ms. Smith, your point's well taken, so hopefully that resulted.
If it's so urgent, why aren't we doing it this evening?
Because we're talking about it right now, and I don't
But,
think that's,
the chairman
that's
sets
fine.
the agenda, it could have been scheduled for tonight. We have a canceled meeting for this evening, and yet we're being pressured to schedule a special meeting to do something we could have done this evening.
Madam Chair, I'm ready to work, so if you want to pick a date in March, let's do that, and if hopefully we can all make our schedule
Mr.
work.
Frager, I do know, nights,
That's not an issue right now, but the way that, I just wondered if some of those, I mean, we've got 1 o'clock meetings. Obviously, we want to have some daytime meetings because of the constitutional officers, talk about their budgets. But, I don't know, I'm with Ms. Smith, I think that a project of this magnitude, we have had boundary adjustments over time, but nothing to address it. It's only like an occasional lot where the property owner either wanted it all in the county or all in the town, and they were accommodated. But this is completely different, this is large scale building, and I'm afraid that if we don't do it right, we could wind up in a fiasco like the post office, where 2/3 of the people that actually use the Washington zip code for their address can't go up there after dark and get mail because there's no lights there. There's not great difficulty in putting up down-shaded lights to protect the paper. And the employees, for that matter, I mean, we have lights in Amosville.
I would like to have a conversation with the board and with the landowner to clear up questions. I don't know if we can have a Wednesday evening meeting, March 16th.
I have a meeting on the Ides of March, and then I think that, that Friday is,
Fire station.
association.
A Tuesday,
I do like to have dinner with my family occasionally.
You certainly,
Probably not.
just like today, you have a day session, for your regular board meetings, you have day session, evening session. My My recollection of your one PM budget work sessions is that they usually run for, 2 or 3 hours. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to have a 1 PM and a 7 PM on the same day if one of those dates works. You have that scheduled for the 14th.
How about the 21st?
You have a broadband authority meeting at 5:30. So you could do it after that broadband.
Does that make sense? Was there nobody's gonna come talk to us?
Well, we don't know what dates the landowner's even available, so why are we looking at dates until we know what the schedule is?
I would like to offer them a date. They've written me several letters and now it's just not going to reply to them.
Well, if they give you their dates, then you can Google poll us and we can set a date.
3 days notice, I think.
Yep. Yeah, if that works for everybody else, I'll be happy to do that.
Well, that was fun, okay.
All right, so we'll shoot for an evening meeting after one of our other meetings.
You have a motion for a work session with the owner. I don't know that I heard a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
I don't think it's necessary.
I mean, if we're gonna, I'll withdraw the motion.
Everything that's in the motion, the chair's already allowed to do.
If you're okay with it, Mr. Woodson, I'll just go ahead and
Thank
ask for dates.
Can't win.
We're going to have our motion or withdraw?
No.
Withdraw, she's just going to schedule with 3 days notice.
I'll find some dates from the landowner, I'll set up a Google poll that we've done in the past, and we'll figure it out. Next is the building committee requested direction.
Madam Chair, I'll start off that. We had the joint meeting between the building committee and the board of supervisors, and we talked about a great deal of different projects that we're looking at and working on. So we left with the sense that we didn't really have a consensus on the board, and we weren't really looking for what that means because it was such a lot of information to go through.
Mr. Harris.
We can't hear you at all, so.
Oh, you can't hear us?
Can't hear him.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, anyway, our committee would like to have a consensus of the board now as to exactly what projects we should be working on and in what direction. And namely, those are, we thought we had a consensus that the jail is a priority, that we start working on that and getting, plans together and maybe get something on to the bids. Question proposal. But we really don't have a general feeling on what the board wants us to do with a new project. And that is, we may have to go back and look at the different, artist rendering of that, but do we want a courthouse campus that is just a courthouse over here, a new building? How do we want it oriented? Things of that nature. Of course, we still need to go through it and maybe look at, the needs of each one of the stakeholders in there, namely the different clerks of court, the Commonwealth Attorney, not to mention the courtroom itself, but, I think the judges, the different judges that were approached and interviewed, they really don't want any peculiarities or specialty things. They understand that we're kind of unique out here and it's kind of bland for them, I'm sure, when compared to Loudoun County. Anyway, we just need a consensus on this board in a direction. More than a consensus, I think we really need a vote of this board. How we're supposed to be moving.
They're great questions, I think. I mean, what I took away from that meeting is the sheriff's department and the chimneys and
Right.
the roof. I mean, that sounds like you all, on the building committee agree that that's a priority. I think we gotta start there.
Well, the third, I think, that Dale Waters, and I'm not sure who other the committee members were, but this was, Curry was there as well, and several contractors went up in that attic, and Mr. Curry was there, actually missed that day. So I think they have a pretty good idea of what they can work on and get accomplished on behalf of the city. It's big work, unless for some reason we find a way to sole source it, which is probably more trouble than it's worth. So we have a general direction on that, I think. We're at the courthouse, the new courthouse. I think everybody generally agrees, the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors don't even know, one of the other counties like Fauquier would even entertain us going on a corporate county. So,
So are you asking for a vote on whether or not to jump in on the sheriff's department complex for starters? Is that, you want to disaggregate these questions and address them one by one? or-
yeah,
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I'll put forward a motion that we direct I guess it would be the county administrator in this case to, and you correct me if this is incorrect, or I'm not covering anything, solicit bids on, the repairs and upgrades discussed, in our joint meeting, recently in our joint meeting with the board of supervisors and the building committee, and set that as a top priority.
he certainly can do that, but he doesn't have necessary paperwork right now, but I mean, we're compiling stuff, but.
So then, everything between where we are and bidding would be the direction of the board, which include design, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean,
For the courthouse, we're just gonna fix it up. There's no new design or anything, it's just
With this,
take care of the
well,
outside.
this is basically an envelope project right now.
yeah.
And then, we really won't do much with that if we're looking into anything else, because one of the artist rendering from Wild Wilson is an addition on the back of these buildings. If we're not going to do that, then we can go ahead with the envelopes. If we're going to go with some sort of addition on the back, then it doesn't make much sense to do an addition after we've done some